And welcome in to the Blitz podcast, as always, or not as always, but I am your host today, Mr. Kane Schwartz, and I'm joined by Mr. Jaden Kozak. How we doing, man? We got these last four teams to go. It's
Yeah,
pretty sad.
doing good. We're coming down the home stretch here after the 49ers. We got three teams left. Obviously, some of our best teams, some of our most exciting teams in the NFL, so it'll be a lot of fun to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. We've got the fourth-ranked 49ers on the docket today. Only three teams left. You could probably figure out who those teams are. If you got any guesses on where the final teams are placed, feel free to drop them in the comments on Instagram, on YouTube. But love the interaction we've been seeing lately from all the subscriber numbers, all the likes, all the watches. So thank you guys for that. But let's dive into this fourth-ranked 49ers team. And we got to start with probably the most interesting point to talk about when it comes to this team, and that is the 49ers. So we got them coming in at 26th overall in the quarterback ranks, and that was kind of like the redhead stepchild ranking that we had because it was the big black box that I just saw you raise your hand. But it was the big black box that we had at the bottom, and usually good teams towards the top tend to have good quarterbacks, and that was probably the last ranking remaining that was kind of weird like that. And, I mean, it's weird for a reason. Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant, comes in a weird situation last year, wasn't really expected to do much, but he outplays his expectations, which were zero, and does much, much more. He finished 13th among 39 quarterbacks on PFF rating last year, so he's definitely balling out. There's a lot of people say that he had an easy schedule, and that I could definitely hear that, man. But a lot of quarterbacks who, especially not considering that he was Mr. Irrelevant, but take that out of it. It's like a lot of quarterbacks will struggle with an easy schedule. And he went out there as Mr. Irrelevant, played super confident. You loved seeing like how the confidence that he was playing with really is what I fall in love with Brock Purdy. But confidence isn't everything, so I want to hear your take on Brock Purdy.
Yeah, I mean, I've got kind of a personal vendetta against Brock Purdy because obviously my quarterback, drafted in the same draft class about 6 to 7 rounds earlier, gets compared to him a lot because they both got their full-time starting job at around the same time, and Purdy took off, and to his credit, statistically did a lot better than Kenny Pickett did, but I think there's, you read a little bit between the lines and you kind of start seeing why. Obviously, you look at this group of playmakers, he only played, I think he played a couple snaps in week 7, but outside of that, he only played once Christian McCaffrey got there, which you'll see in a second. We have this playmakers group very, very high. And that is going to help a quarterback like this running this Shanahan scheme. We've seen a Jimmy Garoppolo run this scheme very well for a very long time. And the people that, the old Brock Purdy, Joe Montana, Steve Young graphics that I saw floated around week 16 were, quite frankly, a little insane. But it definitely helps when you've got this playmaking group here to help you out. And there is certainly value to having a quarterback that can play point guard. Like I always bring back the Jimmy Garoppolo reference. Like there is value to that. But I think that's all Brock Purdy's going to bring you here. Like I think box score numbers, he's probably going to look a little bit worse this year. It's going to be kind of hard when you have a Deebo Samuel who can take a screen for 70 yards, or Christian McCaffrey, who is a huge mismatch problem, George Kittle, a huge mismatch problem, and Brandon Ayuk, a very good receiver in his own right. But you take a look per PFF, big time throw percentage. The only quarterback that had a lower big time throw percentage that started, I think more than 6 or 7 games for any team was Daniel Jones. Among all quarterbacks, that means anybody that threw a pass last year. Brock Purdy was 54th in big time throw percentage at 1.7%. And granted, the highest is PJ Walker with 8.2%. So it's a lot of small percentages in there, but he's not going out there winning you games. This is not a guy that you win because of. And I think that
totally
needs to be
there.
made clear among a lot of people. I think a lot of people understand that, but I think that needs to be said. this is not a guy that, is going to go out and force you to wins. This is a guy that's you're going to win with. I definitely think, especially with this San Francisco team, we had them at fourth for a reason. They can win with Brock Purdy, but there are going to be times, just like there was with Jimmy Garoppolo, just like, even the Vikings with Kirk Cousins, we have a 10 where you're like, I just wish he'd give me a little bit more. And they're always going to feel like that at quarterback. That's why they traded up for Trey Lance when they did 2 or 3 years ago when they had Jimmy Garoppolo, who's a perfectly fine quarterback. They're always going to feel like they can upgrade. And, this roster is fantastic and is ready to go. And especially when they have this roster, they're always going to be like, man, what if we went out and did this? Like, I don't know if I mentioned it actually on the podcast or if I just mentioned it, in like an Xbox party or something like that. But the most perfect thing that the 49ers can do after this offseason, go sign Kirk Cousins. Like, he's going to be a free agent. It seems like the Vikings are going to want to let him go. I think that Kirk, he's ran this scheme very well. And I don't want to.
It's better than Jimmy Garoppolo, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I don't want to dwell too much on a guy that's not on the roster currently. But I don't know. I just feel like the 49ers
do like that idea.
Yeah, I just always feel like the 49ers are going to want to upgrade over Brock Purdy. I think he's a fine quarterback. I think he is a starter in the NFL, which is not a lot of, how many Mr. Irrelevance became starting quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm pretty sure the answer is 0. So definitely credit to him for that. I do think he's one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL. That's why we have him at 26. But if you drop him in some of these situations like New England, like Houston, like Tennessee, are we getting top 32 play from Brock Purdy? That's the part that's unsure. But with a Kyle Shanahan here,
I think you're still getting top 32 play from Brock Purdy.
If he's not with because how many times have we seen C.J. Beathard? How many times have we seen Nick Mullins come in and play well for San Francisco? The only difference is, and this is a credit to Brock Purdy,
played better though.
Brock Purdy is producing wins. Those guys put up numbers and they were losing. Brock Purdy put up numbers and they were winning. And that's why, he is better than those guys. Those are backup level players. I think Brock Purdy is a starting level player. It's just, what's the ceiling with Brock Purdy? Like, if Brock Purdy balls out this year and plays like his best football, is he cracking the top half? I don't know. Like, when you actually break it down, because
30 touchdowns sounds like a lot for Brock Purdy.
I know. Well, but the thing is, if he gets the 30 touchdowns, who's getting more credit? Him or Christian McCaffrey? Him or George Kittle? Him or Deebo Samuel?
But at that point, it doesn't really matter, bro.
Because they're scoring,
he's executing the offense, and they need that field general. That's always what they've.
That's what you want in San Francisco, is that kind of guy. And I think that, like they did with Trey Lance, I think they were just trying to raise the ceiling a little bit, and that might be something that they find themselves doing in a year's time with a guy like Kirk Cousins, for example. But for right now, Brock Purdy gives you a shot. We do have them at 26, but with everything around him, he can make things work for sure, and can get this team to an NFC Championship game and hopefully get them to break that Super Bowl ceiling that they've been struggling with.
Yeah, for sure. Gotta respect that. I mean, I'm almost not embarrassed. I do stand somewhat behind it. I have the quarterback ranks for the 49ers coming in 19th, which is by far the highest out of the Blitz pod consensus. Got them ahead of teams like Jimmy Garoppolo for the Raiders. Yes, I stand by that. Bryce Young, rookie quarterback. I'll take Brock Purdy over that this year. Yes. Kenny Pickett played one of the worst efficiency-wise seasons last year, not throwing touchdowns. So I'll take Brock Purdy over Kenny Pickett. Justin Fields is a question mark. Danny Dimes is a question mark. I'd take him over Jordan Love, C.J. Stroud, Mac Jones, Sam Howell, all those guys. And then you just get down to the bottom of the barrel. So
I have him at 27th. Mitchell has him at 30th. Tyler has him at 28th. And you've heard what I've said about Brock Purdy, and I was higher than those two guys on him. I just think you take him away from Shanahan, you take him away from Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, and you start to see you're thinking a little bit differently about Brock Purdy. Like, if we drop Jordan Love with all the hype that's been around him in Green Bay, if we dropped him in San Francisco, imagine the hype train that will be following a guy like Jordan Love right now.
But at the same time, I don't know, Trey Lance should have done good if this were just a system that you just drop anybody on the planet in. and then
I'm
it's
out
like,
on Trey
okay, you
Lance.
play good.
Me
Yeah, and I'm
personally,
out
I'm out on
too.
Trey
But if we're
Lance.
saying that it's a system that you just plug and play at quarterback, then Trey Lance should have been good,
But
and he's not.
Trey Lance played a game and a half. The game that he played was
But
a
he's the
slot
third
fest.
stringer now.
We have him
He's
as second.
behind Sam Darnold.
We haven't. Did you
I
put
mean,
together this depth chart, Kane?
okay, you're right. You're right. I mean, reports out of camp are that Sam Darnold's playing much better than Trey Lance, and everybody knows that Kyle Shanahan kind of
Well,
hates Trey
the other
Lance
thing
because they were
is,
forced into that trade. So,
and he
I don't
wanted
know.
Mac Jones, and I think that is what you're getting in Brock Purdy, is like a Mac Jones type of player.
Right.
They have similar skill sets, but Trey Lance, like the funny stat, because we're in August and we're bored and we don't have any football yet, is that Geno Smith threw more passes last year than Trey Lance has thrown in a professional, or not a professional, but a organized football setting in his entire life. High school, college, professional. He has thrown less passes than Geno Smith, career backup, threw last year for the Seattle Seahawks. Like,
Yeah.
that's why I'm out on Trey Lance, is because the experience was never there. It was always going to be a project. And with a team that's this ready to go, they tried to do the two timelines thing, and that so often does not work. And I don't know. I don't think it'll ever happen with Trey Lance. I wasn't big on Trey Lance coming out of the draft. I don't think it'll happen for him.
Yeah, I don't think so too. It's definitely worth talking about though, because they did spend a lot of capital to get him,
I will
and
tell
that's
you
kind of the
though.
only stink for the 49ers front office recently.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of crazy. Is the year before they drafted Javon Kinlaw in the first round, who they've basically got it. They traded DeForest Buckner for a first round pick, picked Javon Kinlaw with that first round pick. Like, they've built this roster. Who we have a 26th ranked quarterback and the 4th ranked team after having back to back drafts where they got zeros in the first round. Like, we look at this past draft class. I think their first or second pick in the draft was a kicker. They had like the worst draft of anybody, and they also traded 3 first-round picks to go get Trey Lance. The Dolphins turned those 3 first-round picks into Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and Bradley Chubb.
Gross. Absolutely gross. And you don't think
And
about the 49ers
Niners
when you
have
talk
still
about
built
bad
this
front
roster.
offices.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
if it wasn't for the guys that they got in that 2017 to 2019 run, and I mean even 2017 or 18, they picked Solomon Thomas 3rd overall.
Yep. Yep.
I guess they just had a lot of swings. Their hits have been big hits. Their misses have been big misses. But because their hits have been so big, and Shanahan is a phenomenal coach, and they've got all these playmakers. They trade a 3rd round pick for Trent Williams, who becomes the best tackle in the NFL. Shout out Commanders. It all works out for them. We are 13 minutes in, by the way.
Yeah. Hey, it is important.
It's
that
my
we talked
fault.
about
I know.
Brock
I'm
Purdy.
just saying.
No, it's important that we talked about Brock Purdy. That was a big point of conversation, probably the biggest one here. So let's move on though. Let's dive into this playmaker group that will make him so much better this year. And we've got them coming in at 1st overall among playmaker groups. So you start out with the dude, CMC, Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. Traded for him last year. I mean, can I take a little bit of a victory lap? I don't think I really took a rightful victory lap for calling Christian McCaffrey to San Fran. I was clamoring for that. For not too much. I wasn't waking up every morning saying that Christian McCaffrey was going to be a 49er. But when we were talking about trades, when it came to CMC, I kept mentioning the 49ers. So I'll take my victory lap there, and it has been great for Christian McCaffrey in San Fran. Still got George Kittle there. Definitely has taken a step back, to say the least, but still one of the best tight ends in football. Still got Debo there. Huge contract. Kind of hoping for more from Debo this season. I've heard a lot of people talk about how they're going to use him more as a running back, but he signed the wide receiver contract. So it's he signed that wide receiver contract with things in it saying, don't put me at running back because I won't be able to play as long. So I think they're going to utilize him as a receiver, but could see a big season out of Brandon Ayuk. He could very well end up being wide receiver 1 here in San Fran this year. We've seen flashes in the past. He's kind of been in the doghouse at different times with Kyle Shanahan, but it seems like he's finally made himself out of there. Got Jawan Jennings in the slots. But a really solid team to say the least, man. I mean, we got them coming in at number 1 on the playmakers, man. Is it Christian McCaffrey leading this charge, or do you see somebody else breaking out?
Yeah, I mean, they've got the
Obviously.
gold. They've got the gold font there at number 1. This is our second group that we've revealed that has the number 1, thing at that position, has the number 1 ranking at that position, and for good reason. You have arguably the best running back in the NFL. You have a guy that at tight end, I think he's firmly in the tight end 2 conversation. I don't know if anybody's touching Kelsey, but there was a point in time when Kittle was healthy. A lot of it gets taken away with fantasy because Kittle doesn't produce as much, but Kittle is one of the top run blockers at tight end in the NFL.
It's a really
Obviously,
good
that doesn't
point.
get taken into account at tight end. But I mean, Kelsey is. I'm not making the argument that Kittle's better than Kelsey, but I did at one point in time.
Yeah.
I think that argument's
Just like
over now,
most
though. But
Yeah.
Kittle still firmly one of the 2 or 3 best tight ends in the NFL. You have one of the best 1-2 punches at wide receiver in the NFL. I think Brandon Ayuk should take the wide receiver 1 reins here. I'm a big Brandon Ayuk guy. Even though they're paying Deebo Samuel that big money, this is about to be a contract year, or it's about to be the year where they make the decision on the 5th-year option for Brandon Ayuk. It's honestly going to be a tough one. Like, he's going to be a really good player that might have his 5th-year option declined. You think about the contracts on this team, just in this room, in this slide. Deebo Samuel's making, borderline top receiver money. Christian McCaffrey's getting paid at the top of the running back market. George Kittle getting paid toward the top of the tight end market. Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. These are guys that are getting paid at the top of their position. And Brandon Ayuk, while he's a phenomenal player, and for 31 teams, he's getting the 5th-year option picked up without a question, they might have to decline it here because they can't really afford it.
I will say they don't have to pay a quarterback.
They do, and that is the biggest advantage. That's why they traded up the draft Trey Lance. That's why they're going to roll with Brock Purdy as opposed to probably going to get a Kirk Cousins like we mentioned a second ago. But I find it hard to believe that Brandon Ayuk gets extended here, as unfortunate as that is. But I am a big Brandon Ayuk truther. I've got him on every fantasy team that I can, that is possible for me. I like him over Deebo Samuel, especially if you're talking about fantasy this year. I just don't know if that usage is going to be there for Deebo. And also the injury things, he fell from wide receiver 3 in 2021 when he was healthy to wide receiver 40 last year due to injuries and just a lot of games where he didn't get the big play. And in those games where he doesn't get the big play, it's going to be kind of hard for him just because he's not going to get the opportunity with all these weapons here. You are worried about the depth, especially at wide receiver. Your slot wide receiver, Jawan Jennings, is not that great of a player, to be quite honest.
I think he's a little underrated. I think he's okay.
He's a nice player. He definitely benefits from having, maybe the best top 4 in the playmakers department. I mean, obviously we have this as the top playmakers department, even with him here. He definitely benefits from that. You got some other guys here, Danny Gray, Steelers legend Ray McLeod here as well.
Yeah.
You're not super excited about any of those pieces. If you do lose a Deebo Samuel, you are talking about one of the weaker wide receiver rooms in the NFL. Even with Ayuk, I think if that were to happen, if Deebo were to miss significant time, we could see Brandon Ayuk emerge into like top 20, top 15 wide receiver conversations.
When Deebo wasn't on the field before, Brandon Ayuk has always had a great game.
I mean, I do think that he's a wide receiver 1 for at least a handful of teams in the NFL. Again, we can play the game of, is he starting is he a top 20 wide receiver? And then we name 20 wide receivers. But I think Brandon Ayuk could be that guy if given the opportunity, especially when you're talking about fantasy relevance. This 49ers team has been able to support a lot of options. They have a lot of names here. The question becomes, how many options can Brock Purdy uphold? How many players can he keep fantasy relevant, especially at the ADP that these guys are getting drafted at? I mean, Christian McCaffrey's getting drafted as one of the first 2 or 3 tight end, or for 2 of the first 3 running backs off the board. Kittle's the same thing, and then Deebo and Ayuk going around the same.
I mean, in redraft, Christian McCaffrey is one of the first 3 picks.
Yeah,
period.
Yeah, you're picking really between him and Eckler, in redraft especially. That's where I'm worried as far as fantasy goes. can Brock Purdy really uphold that? And injury luck for San Francisco has not exactly been kind to them either. You do have Elijah Mitchell here as well. If you draft Christian McCaffrey, draft Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell could eat into his carries here, and that's what you're worried about if you're stuck at that. At that third pick where Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are gone, you're worried about Elijah Mitchell here. Other than that,
they got Ty Davis Price, who they drafted last year. So, like, that running back room. I mean, we know that the 49ers like to use multiple running backs. It's going to be frustrating.
The funniest part every year with San Francisco is if any team proves to you that you don't need to invest in running back, it is the 49ers. They have created dominant running games out of Raheem Mostert, out of Jeff Wilson, and every year they draft a running back in the third round. Then they trade, 4 draft picks for Christian McCaffrey. It is kind of funny just the way that they operate and how, you can produce a very good running game without a good running back, but they keep investing in running back. And I think it's because, if we can create a good running game out of Elijah Mitchell, out of Raheem Mostert, imagine what we can do with Christian McCaffrey. Like, especially when you can do all the mismatch problems.
That was my point the whole time.
I know.
Yeah. No, it's good shit, man. Last thing before we move on from the playmakers, Deebo Samuel's 2021. We know that Deebo can put up elite production in a season. We can't say the same about Brandon Ayuk. Kittle's probably past that point now. Deebo's only 27. He's still in his prime. He should be set to have at least 2 more good years. And in 2021, he had 1,400 yards, 6 receiving touchdowns, and 8 touchdowns on the ground. What?
Can he stay healthy enough to do that again, though? That's the question. This
he's
was
still
a guy
young.
that, even before 2021, dealt with injuries, too. This is why 2021 was such a surprise for everybody, was because he was always in and out of the lineup in his first 2 seasons, with injury problems. And then 2021 happens. Nobody really realized how good he was outside of San Francisco because they were only seeing him for 6 or 7 weeks a year. Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh with that. I don't have the game numbers in front of me. But he was lucky enough to stay healthy all through 2021. And then 2022 obviously was kind of a disaster season for Deebo. Unfortunately, can't stay healthy when he's on the field. He was much less of an impact than he was in 2021. And, I think we're kind of down off the high on Deebo. And, usually I'm a big post-hype buyer, but I don't even know if I'm there with Deebo, unfortunately.
I could see it for sure, especially with the injury concerns. But let's move on to this O-line, who is a pretty stout unit, to say the least. We got him coming in at 8th overall, and you got to start with the guy, Trent Williams. But we were talking before the episode, besides Trent Williams, not a lot of names on this team, that's for sure. I recognized a couple of guys, former Commanders, who were both backup centers for this team. But besides the big dog, the silverback, Trent Williams, there's not much to look forward to on this offensive line. And we've got them in the top 10. So what's your case against this O-line?
Look, we have them at 8th, and like I've said 100 times, we go through this and we put these rankings together in May, and we do it kind of like a rough draft, and we just put them together. And then once we get to the teams, we do a little bit more research into, who they've got, what they could be in the upcoming year. And after doing that, you realize that you could have some problems here with this offensive line. Shanahan's scheme is a system that generally protects offensive linemen. It's created the number 1 offensive lineman in all of football the last 3 seasons, and that is Trent Williams. He's graded out first in 2020, 2021, 2022. It is the highest paid tackle, rightfully so. Again, shout out Washington, 3rd round pick. Let's go. But then you look around here, and if anybody off the top of their head that's not a 49ers fan can name all 4 offensive linemen, again, there's no way you can prove this, and we will definitely not follow through on this promise, but we'll give you a shout out. But, you're really, really struggling. You've got Colton McKivitz here filling in for Mike McGlinchey, who, at worst, you're calling Mike McGlinchey a serviceable level tackle. He got paid very good money from Denver. The rest of this interior, Spencer Burford, Jake Brendel, Aaron Banks, you're worried. You're legitimately worried if you're a 49ers fan, especially, with the quarterback situation where Brock Purdy is mobile, but is not like an elite level creator with pressure on him. He's a guy, like we talked about, that does need the situation to be close to perfect, and the rest of this offensive line, not named Trent Williams, is far from it. I mean, the highest ranking player that played enough snaps, obviously Colton McKivitz falls short of that because they had Mike McGlinchey for a majority of last year, but Jake Brendel at center was ranked 20th among all centers, Aaron Banks 48th among all guards, and Spencer Burford 67th among all guards. I honestly would not be surprised if Feliciano does get some starting snaps here. If
George Kittle had a better run block grade than the entire offensive line outside of Trent Williams.
Yeah, and maybe that's a role that George Kittle plays this year. He plays like a sixth tackle role here, be their little Nick Boyle replacement in San Francisco. But we look at this in hindsight, and you're looking below, and you see some much more well-rounded offensive lines. Minnesota has that nice pair of tackles and some iffy guys on the interior. The Chargers, I would take the Chargers O-line, the Packers O-line. You're starting to get a little shaky the farther you move down, but there is a benefit and there is an advantage to having Shanahan being your head coach and being your play caller here. But you really need to see some development from one of those four guys to feel better and to even get them to this 8th mark this year.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, God forbid, if Trent Williams gets injured.
Oh, yeah. If Trent Williams gets injured,
problems.
We're talking about one of the worst 6 or 7 lines in the NFL. Even if they are protected by this scheme, you're seriously worried. And I honestly think that moves this team down 4 or 5 spots in our overall rankings. Even in this NFC, it becomes, when
you put it like that, you're probably right, but that's a wild thing to say.
Even with a top 6 or 7 defense, maybe even higher than that, and the number 1 playmakers group, you now have a team that has a at the very best, bottom 8 offensive line and the 26th ranked quarterback. Like, Brock Purdy running for his life is not something that I want to see happen all the time.
Or Christian McCaffrey, because he has an injury history.
Yeah, or Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. And I mean, it's rough. I mean, and that obviously, if this offensive line gets picked apart, that running game that has been so successful for them, it's going to drop down in a couple ranks. If you can't run the ball to protect Brock Purdy, you're in trouble. You're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
Trent Williams also 32.
Yeah, dude. He's 34, bro. 34, and when he was in Washington, definitely had his streaks with injuries. I mean, he complained a lot about our training staff and how they didn't treat him right, which respectable. But he's played 14 games in his first season in San Fran, 15 games in 2021, 14 games last year. But he has had an injury history. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play a full season this year as he gets older. So could be serious problems in San Fran there, but we will see. All right, let's move on from this offensive line, and let's dive into the front 7, which is an absolute unit. This is another unit that we have ranked towards the top. We got him ranked 3rd overall. Got to start with Eric Armstead. Well, you got to start with Fred Warner, who is probably one of who are some linebackers you throw out into the same conversation as Fred Warner over the last 10 years?
Luke Kuechly. I think that might be where the bill stops for me. Dude, Fred Warner, like I talked about it with Caden on the Ravens episode, I think Fred Warner's in a tier of his own right now at the linebacker position. You have guys like Shaq Leonard, like Roquan Smith in tiers below him, but I think Fred Warner's alone at the top right now at the linebacker position. I think he's head and shoulders. I don't know if this is like a crazy hot take, but I think the gap between him and the next closest guy at the linebacker position might be the biggest gap in the NFL. Maybe at tackle with Trent Williams, that's the next biggest gap, but you've got him here as well.
I feel like him and Bobby Wagner were going back and forth for a little bit, but Fred Warner
and now Bobby Wagner, obviously taking a step back with age. I think it's Fred Warner up there by himself. Caden did make the argument that it's Roquan Smith and Fred Warner in that tier, but I quite frankly, I do think it's Fred Warner alone at the top, and then along this defensive front, You've got Nick Bosa, who just won Defensive Player of the Year. Phenomenal edge player. One of, I think it's a group of four. I said it was Micah Parsons is the best defensive player in the NFL. I think Nick Bosa's in that conversation. Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, all right there. Like, if anybody made an argument for either of those four guys, you're going to get my respect there.
Yeah, I probably should have mentioned the Defensive Player of the Year to lead off.
Yeah, I was about to say, starting with Eric Armstead was certainly a choice.
Yeah, I know.
Eric Armstead, very respectable player in his own right, but you also have Javon Hargrave coming in here, who had a phenomenal year in Philadelphia last year. Known Steelers legend Javon Hargrave, probably like one of the most like low-profile Steelers that have ever just been let go and then like boomed after they left Pittsburgh. Like usually,
third-round pick.
Usually when guys leave Pittsburgh, things don't really go well for them. Yeah. Like usually
especially
Pittsburgh is the peak of the mountain, yeah. But Hargrave has gone on and put together a phenomenal career. If Hargrave would have signed somewhere, like let's say he went and signed in like Detroit or somewhere like that, somewhere that needs interior help, I would be a little worried because you look at the season that he put together last year was obviously a very good one, but in one of the best front sevens in the NFL in Philadelphia, on one of the best defenses in the NFL, with guys like Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat and that rotation, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, they've got guys to keep Javon Hargrave fresh. And if he went somewhere where he was like, all right, you are now the best player on this defensive front, I'd be a little worried. That would feel like one of those like classic, really good player on a really good defense, signs a top of the market deal, and then goes to a bad team and is just a good player again. But now he is thrust into the situation where he has Nick Bosa, where he has Eric Armstead, where he's got a Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner on the back end, and he's not like the primary concern of the defense. I think you see a lot of what you saw from Javon Hargrave last year. I think you see a lot of the same stuff here again in San Francisco. Drake Jackson, second-round pick last year, was a guy that I liked a good bit. I think that, if you can get even a little bit more out of him, you're really talking about a great group here. I mean, we have them at third for very good reason. Dre Greenlaw also graded out. Fred Warner was second in PFF grade. Dre Greenlaw was ninth. This is probably your premier linebacker duo in the NFL. Even Oren Burks,
Willis and Bowman, and then you got Warner and Greenlaw.
Feels a little bit like that. And Dre Greenlaw kind of floated around the league for a little bit. He's only in year 4. I don't know why, but I thought he was in year 6 or 7. He feels like he should be older. Has he always been with San Francisco?
I believe so.
No
Fifth
way.
round pick out of Arkansas in 2019. I'm not sure though.
Way. I know I'm definitely getting.
I'll do some research, but you keep talking.
I'm definitely getting him confused with a different linebacker. But he was phenomenal last year. Kind of had a breakout that obviously was the best year of his career last year.
Came in at number 79 on the top 100 too. Player voted.
Yeah, I don't know who I'm mixing him up with. It might be Quan Alexander, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Steelers legend.
Yeah, Steelers legend. Dude, did you see legend. He got fined $43,000 for that hit, and he gets paid $3,200 during the preseason per week.
It's the no fun league, man. It's the no fun league. That looks like a fucking clean hit too.
Steelers will probably pay for it because usually with stuff like that, the team will pay for it. But still, back to the 49ers.
Yeah.
I definitely think that if you wanted to argue this group at number 2 or even number 1, you're not going to hear too big of an argument from me. We do have them coming out here at number 3. I don't know where I had them. I probably had them at 3 because of how high I am on Dallas. Oh no, I had them at number 1. I had them at number 1.
Nice. Where did I have them?
You three had them. You three had the Eagles. You had the Niners at 2nd. Mitchell had them at 3rd. Tyler had them at 4th.
Okay.
But yeah,
all top 5 finishes right there. So that's good stuff. Do you think Nick Bosa has a chance to repeat for Defensive Player of the Year before we move on?
I don't know. Especially, when you did the depth chart, technically he's not even on it right now because there's the contract holdout situation.
Good point.
He doesn't have anything to prove. It's not like this is a prove-it year for Nick Bosa in a contract year. Like, he just won Defensive Player of the Year. Very rarely do you see a Defensive Player of the Year repeat just because, the sack numbers. Like, if Myles Garrett adds one more sack and a couple more pressures in there and the Browns' defense is a little bit better, he's a strong candidate. Micah Parsons was a strong candidate last year.
Yeah,
I think TJ Watt in a healthy season with that defense around him going to always be a candidate.
I think those are the 4 guys, though.
Oh
Those are the
yeah,
four guys.
it's 100%. Like because as a corner, I feel like it's so hard to win
Aaron
it.
Donald, maybe, but he's getting older, you know.
Well, that and he's got no help. Like he's going to get triple teamed he's just not going to be able to put up the numbers to be able to do that. And I think all four of those guys, we're talking about, we have the second ranked, third ranked, fourth ranked, and 10th ranked front seven, and I'd even be willing to put Cleveland higher, especially with some of the moves that they've made recently. They can help elevate these guys to get those numbers that and Aaron Donald at this point in his career and with the team around him probably isn't going to get to. But it is definitively one of those guys because it's just so hard to win as a corner now, and even worse as a middle linebacker because your job's so hard as a linebacker, and with corners, unless you put together a 12-pick season or something like that, you're probably not going to – you just don't have the counting stats available to you like there are with sacks and pressures.
Right, exactly. Solid chance for him to repeat this year, but we will see how it plays out. But let's move on to this secondary as we dive into the last position group. God, this is a less impressive group. We've got them coming in at 16th. We were talking a little bit before the episode. Maybe there's a little overhype on the former USC safety Hawaiian with nice long hair who plays safety in Hufanga.
There we go.
Okay. Hufanga. I can't get the first name. Good luck with the first name. But Hufanga is the dude. I mean, he's fun to watch. 23rd out of 88 players in PFF grade last year among safeties. So, he wasn't, absolutely outrageously bad. But, I'm saying it was supported. No. You could say that he was a good player last year.
Yeah, he was good. The Troy Polamalu comparisons kind of made me a little unhappy. I was trying to think of a bursted my bubble or something like that, but I couldn't. I don't know why. I kept getting rubbed my gills, but that doesn't even make any sense at all. What am I looking for here?
Yeah, there's something there, bro. There's a phrase.
It's it really blanked my blank.
Ruffled my feathers.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
That's not what you're looking for. There's something with gills, though. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
There's definitely something with gills. But yeah, I mean, he was.
This is what you come for.
Yeah,
this is what you come for.
And then Charvarius Ward was a guy who, when he was signed over from Kansas City, everybody thought it was a little bit of an overpay. He got a 3 years, $40 million, and came out and played. Graded out as the sixth best corner in the NFL last year, and this was a group that we were severely worried about in the secondary. Charvarius Ward is your CB1, and you're looking around, and there's not a whole lot else to support. You also lose Jimmy Ward from this group. That's definitely going to hurt. Was probably the best player on this secondary, not named Charvarius Ward last year. You're worried about the rest of this group. If you can get a sixth ranked season out of Charvarius Ward again, twice in a row, you're very happy, and he's put himself into the top 10 corner conversation. Hufanga, I think, could take another step here in year two, but Tashawn Gibson is on his ninth team in the NFL now, it feels like. Yep. You got Isaiah Oliver here.
Who is kind of slept on. Isaiah Oliver, 10th out of 118 corners last year on PFF grade.
Yeah, had a solid season with Atlanta.
Former second-round pick.
Yeah. And then I think it's Diamador. I think that makes the most sense with how I was looking. It's a lot of double letters.
Yeah, when I was putting together the depth chart.
It's just one double letter.
Lenore. Is it Lenore? Obviously.
I'd imagine it's Lenore. We do have him as our breakout candidate here. Is probably the worst player on this group present day. But if he can take a step up, you're much more excited about this group here as well. The depth is also a bit of a problem. The starters aren't good. The bench isn't good either. The starters are fine, but you have a couple spots where you're looking around and you're like,
Be optimistic.
Yeah, but you have
we're at
front
the
seven.
Team. So we got to start.
You have a front seven that's as good as it is. That could very well finish out as the number one front seven in the NFL next year. That's going to help this secondary a lot. That's going to keep pressure off these guys. They don't have to cover for as long when they've got Nick Bosa, Armstead, Javon Hargrave, and Fred Warner even kind of being a little bit of an extension of this secondary. Is one of the only linebackers in the NFL that can be a serviceable run defender and tackler, and can also turn around and chase posts and stuff like that a lot of teams don't have that advantage. So that definitely helps out with the coverage unit.
So let's start to wrap it up here as we do the coaching slide. We got them coming in at second overall, and because of the man, the dude, Kyle Shanahan, who started as my very own man. He was in Washington when RG3 was there, heads over to Atlanta, gets Matt Ryan a nice MVP, takes him to the Super Bowl, yada yada, and he's been fantastic in San Fran. I mean, they've got a Super Bowl appearance. I mean, making the playoffs every single year. He's one of the best. And if you wanted to call him the best coach in football, that's fine. Like, I wouldn't argue against that too much. Huge Kyle Shanahan guy. I mean, there's not really much to say, man. I mean, the dude's a guru, and he's going to coach for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Shanahan has been one of my favorite coaches in the NFL. I remember, I don't know if it was last season or the year before last, where they started out pretty slow, and there were a lot of calls for Kyle Shanahan to maybe lose his job, which I thought was insanity. You know, I've said this about Mike Tomlin. I've said this about a number of other guys, where it's like, if, you know, X team fires this coach, there will be teams that will fire their head coach immediately, so that way they can be ready for, you know, a Kyle Shanahan or a Mike Tomlin or a guy like that. He's created one of the most common schemes in the NFL. You're seeing some variation of the Shanahan scheme in probably a little bit over half of the NFL teams now. You know, it's one of the most revolutionary offenses, maybe even in the history of the NFL, as far as like the impact it's had on the rest of the league. You know, defenses are being schemed to learn how to stop this. Stop this scheme. There's kind of some questions about maybe the culture. Like, he's not like that, you know, he's not a rah-rah guy. He's not, you know, like, he doesn't have like a Tomlin-esque
I think
quality
behind
or,
the scenes, he's a little bit more like fired up.
and I mean, I don't think that like he's like a total like problem. Like, who's like the best example of that? Of like,
Just doesn't care.
Joe Judge just comes to mind for me a little bit of like, just like,
doesn't care.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of guys. Brian Flores.
Well, yeah. And the one that just came for me was Arthur Smith. Like, Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
We talked about when we did the Falcons episode of like, maybe there's a little bit of question of culture there, but
Mike McCarthy.
I think that's the only criticism you can really draw on Shanahan is, I mean, you even look, you know, he's an offensive guy. He's put a guy like DeMeco Ryans in a position to go get a head coaching job. They had Raheem Morris here as well. They bring in Steve Wilkes, who had a nice little run to finish the season with Carolina as the interim head coach there. I think that he could 100% maybe put himself back in the conversation for defensive coordinator or for head coaching jobs. The only problem is he's a little bit on the older side. Teams are looking for youth now, so especially
and you just lost that youth in DeMeco.
Older defensive coordinator. You got the two things that teams don't really want in a head coach anymore. As unfortunate as that may be for him, you know, he definitely deserved a fair shot in Carolina. I don't really know if he got it. I remember that being a conversation point, but is going to be not an upgrade, but it could have been a lot worse as far as downgrading from DeMeco Ryans at defensive coordinator. You also have Clint Kubiak here as the offensive coordinator as well. Needs to figure this shit out because he was the passing game coordinator in Denver last year and was one of the biggest crashing and burning failures in the NFL last year. So you really hope he can figure this out. But I think
it's just a title, man.
This is Shanahan's offense. He's calling the plays here. You know, Clint Kubiak, excuse me, not to you know.
I know you're aging yourself a little bit there.
Yeah.
I know.
He's going to be much more of a pass game coordinator here with Shanahan is going to be calling the play. So overall, we do have this as the second ranked group. I can't reveal who we have at number one. I feel like number one's pretty set in stone, but, you know, there aren't probably any other head coaches other than the guy that we have at number one that I'm taking over Kyle Shanahan.
I mean, these top four teams, all the in the coaching spots, I think all those coaches are Hall of Fame coaches.
Oh yeah, Shanahan's tough because he's younger. Doesn't have.
Dude,
he's young. Okay, he's been a head coach for 5 years.
Okay, all right. Well, when you put it like that, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, like looking down a little bit, like I think McVay probably has a stronger Hall of Fame case than Shanahan does. he kind of implemented his own version of the Shanahan scheme. Like some teams are running that version. Some teams are running the McVay version of the Shanahan scheme, but he's got a Super Bowl appearance. He's also got a Super Bowl title, and has had like legit sustained success. The only stain on his resume really was last season. Kyle Shanahan had a couple not so great years here in San Francisco. And then like Pete Carroll, John Harbaugh, I think have stronger cases as well, really just because they've been doing it longer. Dude, he's got 11 winning seasons in 15 years. He's got a Super Bowl win. Pete Carroll has a Super Bowl appearance and a Super Bowl win in 12 years. They've probably only had 1 or 2 losing seasons, if that.
Okay.
Shanahan,
I think you just got to give him
We have him at second. So obviously we're very high on Kyle Shanahan as a coach and the rest of his coaching staff. And I think that if he coaches this 49ers team for 8 to 10 more years, he's in there. But you're probably going to need to see some team success. Like he's probably going to need to win a Super Bowl to get in there. I mean, you look at all the head coaches in the NFL. I can't name too many head coaches that are in the Hall of Fame just because I don't know the head coaches in the Hall of Fame. But I can't imagine too many of them are in there without a Super Bowl win.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. A ring is a big part of it. He's going to coach for a long time, like I led off with. But his resume is already so insane. Like he brought up RG3 in that scheme. He like I said, he led Matt Ryan and the Falcons to a Super Bowl, got Matt Ryan an MVP. So it's like that resume is already crazy, and he'll continue to build on it. And the fact that we have this team rated at 2 in coaching after they lost to Mika Ryans, like that's pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. So good shit for the 49ers, but let's keep rolling. We got the schedule now. Strength schedule this year is 15th. The Vegas over-under on the win total is 10.5. And looking at this schedule, definitely pretty colorful, but I'm easily going over 10.5. And this might be the easiest over that I've taken.
Yeah,
out of all the power rankings.
This one feels pretty good to me because this team, I mean, we talked about the Trent Williams situation where if he misses time, you're in trouble. But if Brock Purdy misses time, like, you're not freaking out about San Francisco. Like, we were freaking out last year when Jimmy Garoppolo went down. They bring in Brock Purdy, and he is, almost everything that Jimmy Garoppolo was. Some would argue he was even more. So, like, you're more worried about your left tackle getting injured than your quarterback getting injured. And that's kind of why we have this team at 4th, is because they're not so dependent on one player at one position to sustain their success. Which is why I'm going over as well. I mean, I said it during the Steelers episode. They're losing in week 1. We play too well in week 1 to lose. They're going to lose in week 1.
Well, that's all right because they got the Rams after that.
After that, you're looking around the schedule. They do have to go to Philly.
Damn, that's all the way in week 13.
Yep. Like,
good God, man.
I mean,
like you play Cincy in week 8.
Yeah, Cowboys and Cincy, but you got both of them at home. In Seattle, you might have.
This team could win 15 games.
See, the quarterback situation makes it tough for me, but outside of Philadelphia and your divisional games, all your tough games are at home.
If Brock Purdy proved anything last year, he's a winner. He can win the games. Will he be a top 15 quarterback this year? Who knows? But I think he could lead this team to 15.
Also have to remember, and this is, much more for people that are putting actual money on this and putting it into a sports book. 49ers, one of the most cursed teams injury-wise over the past few seasons in the NFL. They've dealt with some of, I think it was a 2020 season where they lost everybody, just like boom. And that's the year that they were 12. They were picking 12 and they traded up for Trey Lance.
Bosa, Kittle, all of them were injured.
All those guys. So that's something you got to keep in mind here. This is one of the most snake-bitten teams in the NFL as far as that goes. But if they can stay healthy, I feel like there's no way that they can't clear 11 wins.
Yeah, for sure. Gotta love it. All right, let's roll on and dive into the rankings segment as we really start to wrap it up. Got them ranked 4th overall in the consensus rankings. Offense comes in at 4th. The defense comes in at 6th overall. And then we got the championship window open, and it's probably one of the more optimistic championship windows that we got because it's 2 to 3 years left. So how about you elaborate on that, man?
Yeah, this is the biggest, or I guess largest championship window that we've had to this point. The only ones that we've had open, we've had like either cracked open, or we've had 1 to 2 years left, or closing fast. The reason why it's 2 to 3 years left here is because you don't have a quarterback contract you're waiting on. Now, 2 to 3 years from now, you will have to make a decision on Brock Purdy. You may have already gotten a new quarterback by that point. The other thing is, you've got a guy like Trent Williams, who's your linchpin on the offensive line. He is 34. If he goes down, and even before he goes down, you're going to need to rebuild this offensive line all across the board.
And Christian McCaffrey's probably only got like
a couple more years
more
left.
Productive years, yeah.
Really productive. So maybe
if he doesn't get snake bitten by injuries, which he had been in the past, but yeah.
Maybe this is leaning a little bit closer to 1 to 2. But at least as of right now, this NFC is really weak, and a roster this good, you can make an argument independent of quarterback, this is the best roster in the NFL. They can be competitive all the time. Like, they can be competitive throughout the next 2 to 3 years. I definitely think 2 to 3 years from now, we're still talking about this team as the leader in the NFC West. Seattle would, I honestly think they would either need to build a San Francisco-like roster around them, which they're trying to do, and they're doing a pretty good job of it so far, or they need to make an upgraded quarterback. We don't know what Geno is going to be, but they should be head honcho in this division for a little bit. And if you're the favorite in your division every year, I feel like your championship window is at least cracked open. At the very worst, especially when you look around at these other teams in this conference, your only team that you're really punching up at is Philly. And that's the team that knocked you off last year. You had some quarterback troubles heading into that NFC Championship game, or in that NFC Championship game. Christian McCaffrey ended up taking a few snaps in the Wildcat. Like,
a little rough.
That's you're punching up at them right now. You're waiting for them to get picked apart. If they can get through Philadelphia, or if they can get somebody like a Dallas to knock off the Eagles before they meet them, this is a team that could very well make a Super Bowl run. But you've kind of got to knock Philly off. Like, they've become over really just a season, they've become rivals. Like, all the talk from like Deebo Samuel and those guys, like talking shit to the opposing team. Like, they've built a rivalry here across division over the course of a season, which I think is really special. But I think fourth for the offense. We look at the playmakers, the offensive line. Again, independent of quarterback, that's probably one of the best groups in the NFL. It's just a matter of, can Brock Purdy get you there? Defense at sixth. It really is a concern about the secondary. If the secondary can play up to the 16th, or maybe even a little bit higher, you're definitely fulfilling this 6th ranking. But yeah, 4th ranked San Francisco 49ers. I think this is pretty good team with a real shot at a Super Bowl.
Yeah, for sure. And last thing I'll say about the window is that as long as we talked about it a lot, but like, as long as you have Kyle Shanahan, that window is pretty much going to be open. He's basically like a franchise quarterback. So, gotta love it for the 49ers headed into 2023, but that just about does it. Got 3 teams left, man, and then the NFL season is here. But we will catch you guys later. Peace!